Former President Trump is clearly leading in the polls, but what if he doesn't win Iowa? And would Governor Ron DeSantis have to end his campaign if he doesn't come in a close second behind Trump? To find out more, we spoke with Brian Seichik, political strategist and former Trump campaign staffer. Brian Seichik, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Of course, Brian, Iowa caucus Monday evening. President Donald Trump is leading Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley by more than 36%, it appears. So it's really a race for who's going to come in second place to posture for, the political future, if you will. DeSantis is slightly behind Haley, but he does tend to do better on the ground with Iowans, and he's also has Governor Kim Reynolds' endorsement. Do you think he will ultimately rise to second place?
Well, he absolutely needs second place to continue this campaign. The notion of 3 tickets out of Iowa is sort of an antiquated one. It's no secret that DeSantis has put all of his eggs in the Iowa basket of both the campaign and the super PAC. They've knocked on hundreds of thousands of doors. They've really sort of staked their entire claim on Iowa. So anything less than a second place showing is really the end of the DeSantis campaign. Nikki Haley, who is polling much better in New Hampshire, really could use the rocket fuel of a second place finish in Iowa to further propel her in New Hampshire to keep this thing going. I also believe that if Trump wins both Iowa and New Hampshire, because they really are different kinds of voters, this race will effectively be over, and America will have to prepare for the longest general election in modern American history.
Fascinating stuff. So Nikki Haley, she may be a little bit too moderate for many Iowans who love former President Trump's straight talk demeanor. How do you think she will ultimately fare in Iowa?
It's going to be very close. You're right. She certainly is perceived as more moderate than both DeSantis and Trump. But I think the question is, are the so-called anti-Trump voters, who still may be more conservative than Haley, decide that Haley is the only one that can beat Donald Trump, and therefore, in some ways, they sort of hold their nose and vote for Haley to sort of give her that fuel headed into New Hampshire a couple weeks later?
And do you expect any surprises coming out of Iowa on Monday? Something that, people might not be forecasting, if you will?
Well, there's some expectations game. I mean, the polling shows Trump up north of 30% right now. I really don't think that matters. If he wins, he wins. He'll talk about how he lost the Iowa caucuses he won't talk about how he lost in 16, but pundits will talk about how he lost in 16 and significantly improved his number now. So the only real surprise would be Trump losing Iowa, which really very hard to see. And if that were to happen, certainly in the political world, up would be down, down would be up, and we would have a very competitive Republican primary. I really don't see that as likely. I think the likely scenario is either DeSantis comes in second and carries on, or Haley beats him in New Hampshire, and the DeSantis campaign effectively comes to an end. Whether he chooses to make that decision will be up to him and his wife. But if he loses Iowa, DeSantis, he's done.
So Trump has said in his legal cases that prosecutors are trying to keep him off the campaign trail, but he's held 4 rallies over the weekend and reportedly 25 since 2021. His campaign set a benchmark for 13 points to win. No one's ever won by more than, I think it's 12.8, but who's counting 12.8 points? Do you think he might overperform on Monday?
It's certainly possible. Again, I don't really think his margin of victory is that significant. The only person that's really in serious jeopardy here is DeSantis. He has to come in second. Anything less than a second place showing is the end of him. And regarding Haley, like we spoke of before, no one's expecting her to come in second. So that would be a quote unquote surprise end quote win for her to beat DeSantis and give her that energy she needs. So the truth is, DeSantis has the most riding on the caucuses, more than anybody else in this process.
What exactly is the path for DeSantis? What type of margin are we talking about? And then say he does come in second within, a few points. What else? Where does he need to perform after that in terms of New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, and so forth?
It's really hard to see a DeSantis path at this point. The fact is, a lot of times in a campaign, we like to say, well, if every voter got to meet our candidate, we'd be in great shape. But sort of the opposite has been true for DeSantis. Sunshine has not been his friend. It feels like ages ago of his high water mark when he was in low double digits, high single digits, and within striking distance of Trump. The more voters have gotten to know him since his big victory in Florida in November of 2022, the less they've liked. But if we were to have this discussion, he would have to have a stronger than expected showing in Iowa, win or come in a very close second in Nevada, do well in South Carolina, and move on. In that scenario, perhaps the donors would come back. Maybe Haley gets out of the race and everybody coalesces around DeSantis. But the fact is, it feels like eons ago that he was in the high 30s, low 40s in some polls. Now he's struggling to stay in the teens. So it's really hard to see a DeSantis path here. Having said that, if DeSantis were to do better than expected, if Haley, let's say, were to win New Hampshire, which is still no polls show her ahead, but if she were, then the national numbers would move very quickly. We saw after Bush-McCain in New Hampshire in 2000, McCain's national numbers moved very quickly. After Obama-Clinton in Iowa in 2008, when Obama won, his numbers moved nationally. So while the national numbers are very daunting right now, a stronger than expected showing or victory by, let's say, Haley in New Hampshire would change the composition. But frankly, right now, it sure feels like Trump is ready to steamroll his way into the nomination.
Right. If you could just talk to us about the power of the endorsement. DeSantis has racked up a few big ones, specifically in Iowa, with the governor there, Kim Reynolds, endorsing him, as well as Bob Vander Plaats. Do these carry any weight? Could this be kind of an X factor that we should be watching out for?
It's hard to see that. I mean, traditionally, endorsements don't mean that much. They sort of get you a little bit of attention for a day or two. Obviously, as with all things Trump, the exception is the Trump endorsement, which in a Republican primary is pretty valuable. But other endorsements, that gets you a day or two notice when they happened. But once we get into the voting booth, I don't really think it has much of an impact. Let's also understand here that Trump is the most known factor going into a competitive primary in decades. Trump's been at the center of the Republican Party for nearly a decade now. He is truly the sun that everybody circles around. So folks are pretty locked in as to whether they support him or not. And if we believe all the polls, and you know, I've been to rallies and chatted with Republican voters across the country, it sure feels like Trump still has a very strong lock on the party, and therefore the nomination seems not certain, but we'll say all but certain at this point.
I have to ask you about the weather forecast. An Arctic cold, historic cold. Iowans, of course, used to the cold weather, but this may be the coldest caucus ever. Do you think it might affect turnout, and who does it ultimately help?
I really don't. I find that in campaigns that are losing often like to talk about the weather as a potential benefit and try to talk themselves into something. But Trump's support is very loyal. You know, people will go through a brick wall for Donald Trump. As you said, Iowans know the cold. This is not something unfamiliar to them. So I don't think the weather is going to have any impact. At the end of the day, this is going to be a referendum on Donald Trump, and all indications are he's in great shape headed into Iowa.
Brian Sychik, fascinating perspective. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
NTD News will bring you live coverage of the 2024 Iowa caucuses in just a few hours. Join me and Tiffany Meyer and our dedicated reporters and esteemed expert panels as we'll be providing real-time updates and in-depth analysis. And join Tiffany Meyer and myself on the Nation Decides 2024 special live coverage tonight. It's going to be a historic night, and we look forward to you joining us at 8 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.